What is up, everybody? My name is Austin Moses, and I serve as your Radiant Brandon Student Director. I'm so excited to be here with you guys to share a word about culture. Culture is a huge thing, but a lot of times we don't really address it or talk about it. It kind of flies under the radar, the impact that it has on our lives. You guys, Generation Z, are a generation of trendsetters. There are trends happening right now as I make this video that I'm sure by the time it comes out won't even be trends anymore. That's how fast it moves. But think about it. What is a trend really? And what is a trendsetter? A trend is started by one individual who makes a decision to do something different. And then other people look at that decision and they say, hey, I can do that too. And before you know it, everywhere, everybody's hitting the whoa. Probably not even a trend anymore. But we're going to talk about a story today of a few people who made a decision to live different lives. So let's look at the story of Daniel. Now I want to give you the backstory. In Daniel, we're dealing with this guy named King Nebuchadnezzar. And King Nebuchadnezzar, he was the king of Babylon. And Babylon decided to lay siege to Israel. And when they laid siege, they defeated Israel. And they took a few of the Israelites back into his palace. And in his palace, they wanted to teach them their literature, their language, about their food. They wanted to immerse them in the culture of the Babylonians. So at that time, King Nebuchadnezzar decided that he wanted to make a golden image, a god for Babylon, that he wanted everyone to worship. And what he said was, at the sound of the trumpets, when the music plays, everyone in Babylon had to bow down and worship this golden image. But these three guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were trendsetters. You see, they had beliefs, they had a commitment in their life that didn't allow them to worship another god. Now, the first thing to know is that when you live a life of commitment, there will always be opposition. So, let's look at Daniel chapter 3, verse 12. And what we're looking at here is there was this other group of people who also lived in Babylon called the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans didn't really like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego because they had been given positions of authority. So, here's what they had to say. The Chaldeans came to King Nebuchadnezzar and they said in verse 12, there are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your God or worship the golden image that you have set up. Now, in today's terms, we'd call these people haters. You see, when you make a commitment, a lot of times there's those people who will come behind your back and they'll speak negatively of you and they'll put you down and they'll tell everyone, hey, look at this person who's not doing this thing. It may seem like a golden image and trumpets and music and all of that is outdated, but I'm telling you today that in our culture, we live under a similar sort of law. There are things that we consider normal, that everyone is supposed to do, that are just contrary to what God has to say. So it is applicable. It is what we live in today. And those Chaldeans will still exist. So in the face of that opposition, that is why we need community. So you see, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had each other, and that matters. Let's turn over to Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 12. Ecclesiastes chapter 4 says, and though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. You see, isolation is vulnerability. We see this even in the animal kingdom. But when was the last time on Animal Planet that you saw a gazelle by itself who did well? It just doesn't happen. We run in herds for a reason. So community gives us strength. It might have been easy if it was just Shadrach, or if it was just Abednego, for them to walk around and say, you know, maybe it's not that big of a deal if I just bow my head, if I just bend the knee. It's not like I'm really worshiping this idol. But when there was three of them, they were able to say, no, we stand for something. In community, we find strength, but it's only in God that we find confidence. So the rest of this story begins to play out, and King Nebuchadnezzar hears this from the Chaldeans, and he calls Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in, and he says, listen, I'm going to tell you this one more time. I'm going to give you one more chance. When I play this music, you better bow down. If not, I'm throwing you in that fiery furnace over there. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego responded to King Nebuchadnezzar. And in their response, they said in Daniel chapter 3, verse 17 and 18, "If this be so, if you do throw us in this fiery furnace, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. And he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." Guys, there's something in there that is so powerful and so important. A lot of times we base our prayer lives around verse 17. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the fiery furnace. And that is awesome, and it's true, and it's amazing. But true confidence is found in those three words to start verse 18. But if not. You see, a lot of times when we pray, we say, God, if you will remove this depression that I'm feeling. God, if you will save my mother who is dying of cancer. God, if you will lift this anxiety off my shoulders, I'll go to church. I'll spend time in prayer. I'll read my Bible. And the example we see here is that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had made a commitment which allowed them to say, God, even if you don't, I will still live this way. I will still worship you. I will still praise you. You see, they realized three things about God. He is our deliverer, he is who he says he is, and he's always with us. We need to know God in this way. We need to know his presence and his character. And one of my favorite communicators, Dr. Doug, he has this saying, YBH. It stands for yes, but how? Yes, I know I need to know God this way, but how do I do that? Well, it comes from spending time in prayer. It comes from spending time in his word with his people, in fellowship, in community. You see, contact breeds confidence. Anything that we are in constant contact with, we become confident in. Even if it's not a good thing, you begin to build a confidence. So we want to breed that confidence in God's presence and his character. So what happened to him? What happened to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Let's further down into the story. So from there, Nebuchadnezzar gets upset. They don't bow down. He throws them into the furnace. He says, now you're going to go pump the furnace up as hot as it can go. Let's throw them in. And so they're walking down, and I have to think that as they were walking to the furnace, they were thinking, God, why have you forsaken us? Why are we being sent into this fiery furnace? Why do we have to experience this? But you know what? Sometimes we get the wrong impression. You see, fast forward to verse 24 and 25. It says, then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors after throwing them in, did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire? They answered and said to the king, true, O king. He answered and said, but I see 4 men unbound walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods. You see, in the fire is where Jesus met them. A lot of times we say God saved them from the fiery furnace, and the impression that that gives us in our prayer life is that I need to pray, God, just remove this test from me. Just remove it. I don't want to go through it. I don't want to go into it. But what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego showed us is that sometimes God is there with us in the fire. Maybe that's where we need to go. You see, there is no testimony without a test. God didn't prevent Daniel from going into the lions, then he met him there. God didn't prevent Moses from going back to Egypt. He went with him back to Egypt. It's a lot of times in our biggest trials that we realize God is there and he's saving us from the fire, from the heat, from the smoke. They changed their culture. From this point, King Nebuchadnezzar realized and saw that their God was the true God, and he put out a decree for all of the nation that their God would be glorified. And we know he's a little bit crazy at this point, so he even went as far as to say anyone who speaks negatively of their God will be torn limb from limb. How did they do that? How is it that now this king has his mindset changed? And what it is he's recognizing the power of God lived out by his people, who chose to live a life of commitment in community with confidence. You see, God has given us the victory. It's time for us to ask ourselves the question, what do I allow to dictate my life? What do I allow to dictate who I spend my time with, the activities I'm involved in? Is my life dictated by my culture, Or is my life dictated by my Christ? That's all I have for you guys today. I love you.